Notice of this meeting was advertised in accordance with the Open Public Meetings Act. Pledge of Allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Roll call.
Mrs. Trueblood?
Present.
Mrs. Stinney?
Present.
Mrs. Skull?
Present.
Mrs. Jackson?
Present.
Mr. Allen?
Present. This meeting is now called to order. Closed resolution number 108-2015 authorizes council to go into closed session. So far we have 2 items for closed session. First being attorney-client privilege, litigation, Pemberton versus Browns Mills EMS squad, and Public Lakes Fire Rescue, and the third being potential contract negotiations. Council, are there any other?
No. I don't have any.
This is not on the agenda, but I thought we were getting a presentation from Mr. Benedetti on...
That's potential contract negotiations.
Oh, alrighty.
And does this include discussion of the information we received?
That's the police department.
Yeah.
That's attorney-client privilege.
All right.
Well, then I have a question on that. I know the report came from Andy. However, are you allowed to, since you're representing, are you allowed to share? I know when we first asked you about information on that, you said you would rather, it would be best that you not get involved.
That was related, Councilwoman, to whether if council was, I guess, pursuing a formal investigation.
Okay.
But it eventually turned into council questions of administration and the police department, which I'm comfortable being involved in. It was as if you were going to do a formal inquiry, you would need an attorney to advise you on those sorts of things.
Okay.
That's what we had previously talked about.
Okay, thanks for your explanation.
Council, is there a motion?
I'll make the motion to go into closed session to discuss the topics brought forth.
I'll second that.
Amy, please pull the council.
Ms. Jackson?
Yes.
Mrs. Stinney?
Yes.
Ms. Trueblood?
Yes.
Mrs. Skull?
Yes.
Mr. Allen?
Yes. Council will now go into closed session and will return at approximately 7 o'clock. Council will be returning to closed session towards the end of the meeting. Also, there will be a presentation concerning contract negotiations between resolution number 120-2015 and the ordinances.
What's concerning the redevelopment?
Right.
It's not about
Okay. Public comments on agenda items only. Mr. Tam?
That would be 110. I'd like to know about it.
Oh, tell you about it? On October 5th, 2010, the Township entered into a federal aid agreement with the NJDOT for grant funding for site improvements to North Pemberton Railroad Station. This resolution, pretty much just extends that time frame to November 30th, 2015.
Why?
Dennis, would you like to talk a little bit about why?
Yes, we recently had a meeting with NJDOT and the Burlington County officials with regard to the long-standing proposed property swap between the township and Burlington County, whereby Burlington County would receive the North Pemberton train station and the trail in exchange for the property adjacent to the township here that is owned by the county. The purpose of the meeting was to discuss with NJDOT and the county about how long it would take for the county and the township to complete NJDOT's requirements so that they can approve the transfer essentially of the grant agreement from the township to Burlington County, and we can close out the grant agreement. This amendment was provided to me by NJDOT, asking that it be authorized solely to extend the time period with the expectation that the transaction will be concluded between now and the November 30th of this year.
What requirements?
The township is still owed some money for the township is owed some money for the improvements, and it keeps the grant open until that date so we can get the final reimbursement. That's in essence
There's one other thing, is that the county and the township need to draft a description as to, the county does, as to how the property will be used by the county with regard to the county trail system and how the building will be used consistent with the grant agreement. So those are the sorts of things. We have some painting to do at the site as well, and the county has a little bit of remaining of their due diligence with respect to environmental. They've done a preliminary assessment. There are a couple of small issues that need to be addressed, and all of that needs to be addressed, submitted to NJDOT, and then NJDOT will give its blessing for the transaction. The township will receive the last $10,000 that it is due for work performed, and then the obligations, all of the obligations in perpetuity of the agreement will go to the county, and they have agreed to assume those obligations.
Dennis, I believe you mentioned it, but the county will be taking over the property as well as the trails, correct?
Yes, it's the building, all of the property at the train station, as well as the trail. And one of the things that NJDOT was pleased about is that the trail is going to be part of the much larger plan of trails throughout the county. And in fact, the county is discussing with DOT requests for additional fundings to fill in gaps in the various trails that we have in the county.
Okay. 120, and what foreclosure matters are they talking about?
Those would be property owners who have for unpaid taxes.
Pardon?
Unpaid taxes.
Tax foreclosures? Thank you.
Okay. Ms. Wadsworth?
What is that?
Good evening, Claire Wadsworth, Browns Mills. Let's see. Relating to Resolution 115-2015, is there a total amount for these outstanding checks?
Yes. That amount is $1,389.51.
And those monies will go back into the general fund?
I believe so. Is that correct, Dennis?
Yes, most of the monies get credited to the current fund. There is one item of $60 that gets credited to water operating, because that's what the purpose of the funds was originally intended for.
Okay. And Resolution 117-2015, I think that's just wonderful. Thanks.
Ms. Quinn?
Ann Quinn, Browns Mills. With regard to 119-2015, the $27,400 for this contract with regards to the repair to well number 2, that's not in addition to all the other monies that have already been spent, because if I remember correctly, the last township meeting, Mayor was talking about, this is part of the original bond.
This total amount is $27,400.
Right, but is it part of the original monies that were anticipated for the repairs of the wells? Or is this in addition to?
It's the total amount. You're saying in addition to, it's the total amount.
No, I'm saying there was monies that were set aside to do $5 million, I believe, for the well projects. Is this part of that $5 million, or is this in addition to that $5 million?
Dennis, where is this,
Because the mayor talked about working off of a note as opposed to a 20-year loan that he talked about at the last meeting. So I'm just trying to get a sense of, is this still the note that you're working off of? Or,
I don't have the certification of fundings in the clerk's, I don't know if the clerk has it, because the actual account, I believe this comes from an existing bond. It is not new debt. I think if that's the question.
one other question I have too with respect to the last council meeting. If I remember correctly, wasn't there talk about a presentation that was to be made to the township residents with regard to the redevelopment property on Lakehurst Road? Because you guys talked at length about it the last meeting, but it was my understanding there would be something for the residents to see.
Ms. Quinn, that presentation will still be taking place?
Tonight?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
Ms. Phillips?
Good evening, everybody in general.
Good evening.
My name is America Phillips. I had two questions in reference to the ordinance 8-2015 and also the ordinance 9-2015.
Mrs. Phillips?
Yes.
There's going to be a public hearing on these ordinances. You will get a chance to ask any question you like. This portion of public comment just relates to the agenda items, but that would not include ordinances. This is a second reading, so any question you have will be answered. It's just not the exact time to ask it.
Okay.
Okay?
On the public comments, I can ask that?
No, there'll be a public hearing on the ordinance.
Okay.
And before the council votes, so your comments and questions could be asked at that point.
Okay. Thank you.
That's the better time to ask the
They'll
question.
be right on topic at that point in time.
Consent agenda. All items listed with an asterisk are considered to be routine by the Township Council and will be enacted by one motion. Should a council member wish to discuss a consent agenda item separately, that item can be removed from the consent agenda and considered in its normal sequence on the regular agenda. Council.
Council President, I would like to address the whole consent agenda, but it's in regards to something that Mr. Gonzalez sent out, and I would ask Council President if council would perhaps maybe look at this a little further, and when the residents come forward, maybe perhaps some of these questions would be asked. Now, we received an email by Mr. Gonzalez, and by the way, thank you for the clarification, Mr. Gonzalez, on these resolutions. I was wondering if it's possible that, let me just read one. I'll give you an example. Resolution 111, 20-15. This resolution authorized the mailing of estimated tax bills. This is necessary annually since the county is normally late with establishing the actual tax rate. And I thought maybe perhaps if we put that in the column like we do when we do the minutes and we answer questions on the webpage for the residents, maybe we could put some clarification on that. Maybe the public would appreciate that. I see some heads being shaked. And I would just like to ask you, Council President, would that be a good idea? I mean, I'm not pulling all the resolutions because I truly support it, except I have one more question.
I think it is a good idea. However,
Okay.
it would be up to administration whether or not they have the time and are willing to do so. So that would be up to administration.
It would save kind of like the residents a lot of time, if they have the explanation.
Understood.
Okay.
Understood.
Okay.
Where we can, and there is time from other duties, I'll be happy to make an effort to continue to provide council with a description and perhaps to put it in a format so it can go on the website before the meeting, sure.
I truly appreciate that, and thank you very much. My last thing is I do want to support my minutes, but at the last minute, and I understand, Mr. Business Administrator, you were not in attendance. In the minutes, Council President, you asked the mayor to get a report from Chief Jantis. I can't see too far away, so he's not back there, okay? On the statistics of having the K-9s and the value they bring to our residents and our police officers here in the township. The mayor stated that he would ask for an updated report. I didn't see it here in the packet. Would you please ask Mr. Gonzalez if he would
Ask him.
let me ask him. Okay.
We've received a report from the chief that needs, in our view, some additional clarification.
Okay.
Before we forward to council the mayor's report on the K-9s.
Okay.
So.
Approximately how much time do you think? The next meeting?
Well, I will try to make it by the next meeting, but part of the clarification that we need will require the chief to do some additional tabulation of information. So the question is going to be, what I'll do is I'll communicate with the clerk in the next week or so and let you know if it's something that can be available or will be available for the next meeting or the meeting thereafter.
Thank you.
And Dennis, some of these things are in his report anyway. Am I correct? That police chief report?
What things?
That I'm speaking of, the K-9s, the arrests, the house break-ins and things like that.
The thing is that we've been talking to the chief and asking the chief for additional information, and we have to work through what specific information, what's releasable to the public, and also what format so that it makes sense. There are some police-centric type reports that don't necessarily make sense to the rest of us who are not police, so we're trying to figure that out. And hopefully in the next few months, we will have something that we will also be able to put on the website as a monthly police report as well. So
that works. Okay. Well, thank you very much. And no rush, no worry. You have a lot on your plate right now. Thank you. And with that, Council President?
Is there a motion to approve?
I would like to make that motion to approve the consent agenda items.
I'll second.
Amy, please poll the council.
Mrs. Stinney?
Yes.
Ms. Jackson?
Yes.
Ms. Skull?
Yes.
Ms. Trueblood?
Yes.
Mr. Allen?
Yes. We will now have a presentation by Dave Benedetti.
Like an easel?
Do we have an easel or something?
Dennis?
In the back.
Dennis,
Yeah, we do. There is one, Dave.
you can start maybe. We all sit at the same time. What?
Mr. Benedetti, before you get started, if you can, just identify who exactly you are and what role you serve to the township, please.
My name is David Benedetti. I'm the Director of Community Development, Pemberton Township. And thank you for letting me explain what we're doing here with this project of acquiring the properties on Juliustown Road. The township went through great effort and many meetings to meet with residents and business people in the township to try to come up with the Browns Mills Town Center redevelopment plan. And one of the key pieces of that plan was the town center right down on Juliustown Road. And that project was identified in the plan as probably the key project for the plan because of the high visibility on Juliustown Road. Recently, 3 of the properties became available and decided to try to acquire those properties to try to implement the plan, because the plan really isn't very good if it's not going to be implemented. So made the effort to try to talk to the sellers of the properties to get it for the township to acquire them at a reasonable price, and I believe that we did. And so we are now looking at acquiring the 2 end pieces, which is the former auto parts store, the house behind that, and also the former Dr. Shapiro's office. And so that is what we're trying to do. We're trying to start the process to redevelop this section, because that goes in line with what we own already there, which is the municipal parking lot to the rear of those properties. And I don't know if there's any other questions that that you would want me to address.
As I said to you, Mr. Benedetti, have you had a conversation with the other businesses?
The other properties on there? No, I have not.
Okay.
I have not had any discussions with them at this point.
Reason being is that one of the main things is support and just reaching out to your community, helping them to establish the needs to stay here in the township and to help them stay into business. I happen to have known the other, Mr. Shapiro as well, businesses for over 25 plus years. And I would just hate for them to pick up the paper tomorrow. I mean, really hate to pick up the paper tomorrow and they see, oh, wow.
Well, I believe that most of those business people in there have been talking among each other. There are the same discussions going back and forth with some of the other property owners. Some of the property owners use the same realtor for selling their property. So I just didn't feel it was appropriate to approach them about that yet.
One of the properties actually is already for sale, correct?
It is.
Okay, and it's been for sale for some time now?
It's my understanding it's been for sale for several years.
Okay. If we do purchase these end properties that are in question tonight, what are our goals moving forward?
Well, our goals moving forward are to, to try to assemble all the properties as soon as possible so that we can proceed expeditiously with this part of the plan.
Mr. Benedetti, how would that, if the township was able to assemble those properties, how would the plan be implemented generically? It's like sort of like what is the, how would it, so the public understands sort of what the goal is and sort of how we would, the township would proceed.
The township would proceed by making the area, this area available to a developer for him to acquire from the township and then develop the area consistent with the redevelopment plan with commercial uses, so that there would be additional commercial uses in the township that would be consistent with the redevelopment plan that was developed by the township.
Why don't you just briefly just sort of explain to the public, because that redevelopment plan was approved a long time ago, sort of what the components are as you understand.
The redevelopment plan was adopted in 2011 by ordinance, by council, and it broke...
Is that after it goes before the planning board, and the planning board approved it as well?
Yes.
Okay.
It was an amendment to a prior redevelopment plan done in 1995, and it was expanded the area of the redevelopment plan. And it broke up basically this area into several groups. One is the destination retail along Pemberton Browns Mills Road. The other was no boom neighborhood down here for primarily residential and a little bit of mixed use commercial. Then there was the Mirror Lake District here, which is the area that we're talking about now. And then there was a transition area along the back here, backing up to Pear Avenue.
And Mr. Benedetti, do we have a developer yet?
We do not have a developer yet. Usually, once we have the properties, then we would probably trying to secure a developer for them.
So you're saying it's better to purchase the property before we get a developer?
Well, it gives certainty to the developer. The developer isn't going to be concerned that things are just not going to happen. If we own the properties, we are then able very quickly to transfer them to the developer once we're able to get and identify a developer that's going to develop it the way the township wants it developed.
So what do you feel, if we go ahead with this, what do you feel the benefit is to purchasing these properties now? Like what would be our benefit in doing this?
The benefit to us would be it will make it much easier for us to attract a developer to the site once we acquire the properties.
Did it make it easier to attract a developer once we purchase the end properties that's before us today?
Well, they all kind of, the total solution is for us to acquire everything.
Use the mic.
It's for us to acquire everything.
So you're saying the developer will look more favorably if we already started a process?
Yes.
Okay.
And this is the initial step in that process?
Yes.
And Dave, would you be so kind to explain to the public some of the other steps that we would have to go through, like the Pine Lands and to completely clear everything so that we can completely move forward?
Well, the transaction would have to be conditional upon us having an appropriate appraisal that we're not paying too much for the property.
Mm-hmm.
It would have to have a phase 1 study done to make sure there are no environmental issues. And before any of the buildings would be demolished, we would have to have approval from the Pinelands Commission because they require any building over 50 years old have an approval from them before it's demolished.
And the obligation to purchase would be contingent upon satisfying all three of those
That's
conditions, correct? But you need if it's approved, that would allow you to proceed to try to meet those conditions.
Yes.
Council, is there any more questions?
I'd like to ask you, oh, I'm sorry, go ahead. Sure.
I remember at the last meeting, someone asked if it had any historic significance, and I see in the presentation that it does not. Is that correct?
At this point in time, there is no known historical significance. And that's, to the best of our knowledge at this point. Once we make a request to the Pinelands, they will look at it in a more formal process.
Ms. Denny?
Yes, that was one of the questions there. Dennis, could you stick your head around the corner a minute? Would we be able to seek any type of help or from the state? I know when we made a decision to build the Early Childhood Center, they came in, they sent some people from EDA and so on. Would this qualify us to do the same?
Well,
yes.
What we're doing and we're asking the council to do right now wouldn't necessarily qualify for us for anything.
Okay.
But once we are able to identify a developer, and obviously we'll have to come to council with regard to a designation of a developer. Council has a part of that, and the developer presents a plan. The plan may include not only the developer's private monies, but bank financing, and may include some state sources of funding, depending on the nature of the project and whether the developer wants to apply for state funds as opposed to the developer having his or her own money.
Okay.
And just to be clear, the money to purchase these properties is coming from UEZ money, correct?
that's correct.
Which we currently have $1 million. Council, any other questions? Thank you, Mr. Benedetti. We appreciate it.
Mr. President, can I ask you something before we do this? If we, as council members, would agree, because there's quite a few people here, I'm not sure who would want to speak, if not all, but out of the courtesy to give each person an opportunity to speak, if we could just maybe limit it to 5 minutes, if they would like to have a comment on, or even ask Mr. Benedetti a question or two, so that everyone will have an opportunity.
Sure.
Would you do that, please?
Yes.
Council?
But
Thank you. Thank you,
good
sir.
idea.
Yes.
Thank you.
Right, and we're also, I was going to mention that, and we were also, when you come up, we're limiting it to one time up also.
But Diane, this would occur, this is going to be an ordinance.
Right.
There's going to be a public hearing, which is about, this is the next item on the agenda.
Right.
So all the public could ask any question, Mr. Benedetti's here, and we're all here.
Okay, as long as he's here, okay.
You could do it right through the public hearing in the ordinance as opposed to doing it separately. It's literally next on your agenda.
Right, I saw Mr. Moorhead's hand go up, so that's, Mr. Moorhead.
Just wait 1 second, Fred.
We're going to open it up for...
It's got to introduce the ordinance first, and then... It's going in the back.
It took two of you all to move that? Ordinances for second reading, public hearing, and/or final adoption. Ordinance number 8-2015, an ordinance of the Township of Pemberton authorizing the purchase of properties located at 50 Juliustown Road and 31 Bank Street in the Township from Henry and Ann Byerly. This is now open to the public.
Do a motion.
Okay. Is there a motion to...
I would like to make that motion to approve ordinance for the second reading. The ordinance on the properties located at 50 Juliustown Road and 31 Bank Street in the Township from Henry and Ann Byerly, sorry for the missound of the name. Thank you.
That was a motion to adopt, correct?
Excuse me?
Yeah, it was, Sherry. Yeah.
Oh.
I think Diane said approve, but yeah, that's...
Oh, to adopt the...
That's fine.
Okay.
It was absolutely perfect, yeah.
Amy?
No, you have to do public comment.
Okay, now, public comment. Mr. Moorhead.
Smile,
That's what I
Fred.
was trying to get to. Okay.
Fred Moorhead, Browns Mills. Couple questions. So we buy the property and we don't complete the sale of the properties in between these bookends that we're buying. So then we have vacant stores owned by the township, or we have vacant lots owned by the township, and we can't complete the plan because there's 3 stores in between, and there's a house that isn't determined yet, the blue house on Bank, or wherever that is.
Bank.
You buy them now, you don't even know if the Pinelands is going to permit tearing them down, so you're going to own vacant stores. You're not doing real good with the vacant stores now.
It's contingent.
I hear it's contingent.
You wouldn't spend the money until you got Pinelands approval.
Okay. So, meanwhile, the owners are hanging fire for the Pinelands. They're waiting for the Pinelands to make a decision before we can give them our money. Okay.
The agreement would be contingent on Pinelands approval.
Okay, but it's not contingent on us being able to get the 3 stores in between.
Correct. That would not be in the agreement. Correct.
Okay.
Mr. Benedetti, what is, if this goes through, what is the plan for the properties in between the bookends, as Mr. Moorhead said?
Well, our plan is to try to acquire the remaining properties in between. One of the properties is currently for sale, and we will approach them once we do one step and follow up with the second step.
Which property is for sale? Sun Market or JC's or the laundromat?
If I may, the 2 properties that would be next of interest to us with respect to assembling the property are adjacent properties, and that is JC's and Sun Market. They're adjacent to the properties that are the subject of purchase today.
Right. So those aren't for sale as far as I know.
JC's
is
for
it?
sale.
Oh, okay. I note on the redevelopment plan, the horseshoe, where it comes out on the right-hand side on Juliustown, just to the right of there is a vacant lot indicated by green. I think that's currently occupied by 30 Juliustown, which is an old squad building that this township tried to seize in court. And we're not able to do it.
The Browns Mills Emergency Squad?
That's correct.
Is that the one?
That's correct.
Okay.
Now, those of us that might think of conspiracies and plots and that sort of thing might think that you were trying to do something nefarious and underhanded. But I assume when you're going for eminent domain, that has to be published.
You need a public purpose.
Oh, yeah, a vacant lot.
No, I'm saying to file an eminent, I'm answering your question. To file an eminent domain action, you need to, the state law requires that the municipality has a public purpose for the acquisition.
Right,
And
unless you get sued by the township for your property.
Well, I think you're talking about another matter, but yeah. I'm not sure what that has to do with this, but okay.
It's adjacent to what you want to build, and in the plan, it would be a vacant lot with grass on it. So it definitely applies to the situation. What is your move for our property?
That I'm unsure of, but the township was interested in this property when the plan was approved years ago.
I'm aware of that.
Right, so, I mean, that would go against the conspiracy theory.
Would it? Okay.
No, I'm not talking.
I've heard a lot of talk about developers. They tried with developing the Acme Shopping Center, and I don't know why you guys keep focusing on developers when they don't seem to appear, and all you have is continuing vacancies of all the small stores that we have in town. Subway's gone. Martucci's is opened back up, so you're still at 42 vacant stores, but you're holding out for a developer. I don't know why you do that. I think you ought to focus on getting businesses in here. Mr. Benedetti is being paid some of that, I think, to do that, to encourage businesses to come in here. Maybe we need somebody in zoning that can help small businesses come in here instead of just putting up roadblocks. But, what do I know? Thank you for your time.
Mr. Gonzalez, was that one of the thoughts? Because thus far we've been unsuccessful in, successful in finding a developer for that main drag. Is that one of the thoughts that why we're targeting this area, or at least looking at this area now?
This entire area is being looked at because this is the one redevelopment area that was approved by the planning board and the council, and it also can serve as the centerpiece of the town for commercial business. The redevelopment plan that was adopted by the planning board and the council contemplated 6 sub-districts, and efforts have been made and continue to be made to develop all of these properties consistent with the plan that everyone agreed to some years ago. And the fact that a piece of property that somebody else owns is green on this concept plan is of no consequence. It has no impact. This is a concept plan. These sorts of plans are done every day throughout the United States of America as plans for development of communities throughout America, no matter what's there now.
Thank you. Ms. Wadsworth, and then Ms. Quinn.
Hello again, Claire Wadsworth, Browns Mills. Am I understanding this right? $330,000 for these properties will not be spent until an appraisal's done, some type of environmental study is done, and then Pinelands gives approval for the buildings to be torn down.
Correct.
Okay. Are there any costs attached to the appraisal, environmental study, and getting the approval by the Pinelands?
Yes.
Monies will be spent. So,
Well, the appraisal was approved already. The cost for the appraisal was previously approved.
But it still is a cost.
And
yeah,
The costs for the appraisals were approved by the council already, and our township engineer, within the context of their existing agreement, will perform the services with regard to the Phase 1 environmental assessment.
now those,
okay, so we're incurring more than $330,000 of expenses to purchase these properties.
the total amount is $394,768.72.
Okay, and above the 330, is any of it coming from UEZ?
It's all coming from
Okay.
UEZ.
Thank you. Okay, now another question. We have $1 million in UEZ money. Is that there because businesses don't want to take advantage of that money? Businesses in the township? Because UEZ money was originally set aside for businesses to use that money. When I had Nature's Best Florist, I actually got money from UEZ for the sign at my store. So is that why we have $1 million left, because no one wants that money?
I don't know the answer.
I'm not sure why the township held on to it, but I can give you the definition of what UEZ is. The UEZ was enacted in 1983 and administered by the Department of Community Affairs. The UEZ program was created to revitalize designated urban communities and stimulate growth by encouraging businesses to develop and create private sector jobs through public and private investments in designated zones.
Okay, and that's why I was able to get some of that money, because I was in one of those designated zones. And I do understand that, but thank you for explaining it to the rest of the public. Does council know if businesses have been reapproached? For example, when Maurice Jones was the head of the UEZ, the reason I found out there was money there is because when I opened the store, he came and introduced himself to me and explained the UEZ fund to me to see if there was money I might need to move my business forward. Has that been done to the businesses that are in between the bookends?
Mr. Gonzalez?
The current UEZ funds that we have been intended from the administrative perspective for the development of the area that we're talking about. If the administration had made a decision to make it available to pay for small businesses' signs, we would have done that, and there was a choice made that that the remaining money, because it doesn't get generated, no more money gets generated.
Correct.
The state not only took money away from many municipalities, but also took the means by which the funds were replenished. So it's a limited amount of money. It's not going to grow, and therefore the intention was that it should be used for larger purposes for the redevelopment of this area, rather than small grants for store signs.
Well, it wasn't just for store signs. I was actually offered money to upgrade my computer system. So the money isn't just for store signs. I'm not sure that answered my question. So instead of offering this money to the businesses in between the bookends, which are not real attractive, everybody here agrees with that, we're considering taking that property by means of eminent domain instead of offering them can I finish?
Go ahead.
Thank you. The ability to upgrade their property with UEZ funding, which is what UEZ money was initially intended for?
Well, how do you pick and choose which businesses you'll...
You don't pick and choose. You offer it to everyone, and whoever applies first gets the money till it's gone.
Well, nobody mentioned eminent domain.
No.
We're not...
Actually, it was briefly mentioned.
That it could be taken by eminent. It is not, as I think, any of our intention to do any eminent domain.
I think one thing we have to look at as well is the stores in between. JC's, is my understanding, is on for sale now. So we're not doing anything that they don't want. They're looking to sell.
Sure, but I don't think they're looking for it to be taken.
But no one said it was going to be taken.
Well, again, it was briefly mentioned.
Okay. Well, with that being said, they're looking to sell it, which indicates to me that they would not want to do any upgrades at this point because they want to sell it. So,
okay,
as far as I know, no one has addressed them with that.
Okay, but to sell a business that's been sitting on the market for numerous years, an upgrade may make it more appealing to be sold. I mean, when folks go to sell their homes, often a realtor will come in and say, your property will have a better chance of selling if you put new carpet in, or if you put aluminum siding on, or something like that. So again, these funds are available for businesses. That was the original intent of UEZ money. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Quinn?
Here's my concerns about buying these properties. I'm not against redevelopment for this town, but what I see coming down the road is not a bright, sunny picture. We spend this money to buy these properties, and then you're trying to acquire the other two properties, one of which is now for sale. Everything is open-ended. There's no timeline, it's all generalized here as to, okay, this is what we want to do. The redevelopment plan was approved, I believe, in 2011. We're now in 2015. What happens, we spend this money, those properties sit. So now you don't have $1 million in UEZ. You're going to ask the residents to pay more in taxes so you can redevelop the town because you didn't do it right the first time. That's where I see this going. I'm for development, but nobody's questions have been answered. We can't get developers in here. I've asked numerous times, who have you talked to? I never get a name of a developer that the administration has talked to. Months ago, the mayor said to me, a development company from the Midwest reached out to Pemberton Township about the Acme Shopping Center. I asked him who it was, and he couldn't tell me who it was. To me, asking to know who it is just out of curiosity, we have a right to know. You're not giving us any information.
Well, Mrs. Quinn, just if I may just say, just on your point, actually, the council, over a number of years here, within the last 4 years, approved in public agreements with 2 developers who, at the time, were interested in pursuing the development of the Browns Mills Shopping Center. And so certainly, those developers were made public because it was approved through an agreement at a public meeting. I think the point that you're raising is that it's difficult. It's just like if you were looking to negotiate with an individual to acquire a business or a property, I don't think you would want the whole world to know who you're talking to and what the terms are till you've reached the best deal possible that you view. And that's what that we've been trying to do on behalf of the township as well. Obviously, these redevelopment deals are fairly complicated, so there's a lot of details, and the agreements, even that have been approved in public, have a lot of detail in them in terms of the kinds of terms and conditions that each side is required. But to sort of lay all that out in advance would undermine the position of the taxpayers, because then we'd be giving away sort of what not be able to necessarily get the best deal. So it's not done in any way to shield anything from the public. It's really there to get the best deal for the public, and when it's in fairly final form, then presented for public discussion, sort of like what we're having now about the acquisition. The township negotiated these prices with these property owners, and now we're coming out in public and discussing it because the administration has reached a deal that it thinks is fair. And the hope is, and now we're airing what the deal is and sort of what could happen. But so I don't think there's any nefarious motives is the point. It's just sort of always been to protect the township's bargaining interests.
My concern is this. If you pass these 2 ordinances to purchase these properties, that's $394,000 plus less in the UEZ fund. We're 4 years down the road from the redevelopment plan being initially approved. There's got to be some kind of a return, because if you keep going down the road with this because you can't secure a developer or you can't overcome something that you need to overcome, it's money that we spent that we can't get back. So now what I'm concerned about is somewhere down the line, these properties don't get redeveloped. There is no return on the taxpayer dollar, because we're already struggling as it is, and our taxes are going up in 2015. My concern is there just seems to be too much open-endedness, in my opinion.
Mr. Petronas?
Good evening. George Petronas, Browns Mills.
Good evening.
It's a flawed theory. Eventually you're going to sell it. It's about 800 degrees in here.
I participated in quite a few of those public meetings that were conducted while the redevelopment plan was being developed. I remember distinctly that the redevelopment plan started before 2008 and that it anticipated federal and state money up to $110 million to make it possible. At the time that the plan was adopted by the planning board and by the council, I believe that expectations had shrunk because of the economic meltdown to $30 million, of which none of that money is available now. And in a state, and it was all state money at that point, there was no federal money anymore. And in a state which can't pay its retirement plan obligations, I don't think that it's realistic to anticipate and hope for state money at some time in the future. So I think it's reasonable to assume that we're on our own resources. That having been said, do I understand the process correctly? You will commit to purchase these properties, then find out if they can be torn down, get Pinelands permission to tear them down, and if Pinelands approves it, then you'll go through with the sale. Is that correct?
Yes. The purchase. Yes.
Yeah, I'm sorry, the purchase.
Well,
You'll
it
have
has
to part...
be- Well, the township needs an appraisal that says that we're paying fair market value for the property as well.
Okay, and then we go for Pinelands approval, and if they approve,
Yeah.
then we can get it. And you'll have to pardon me, I've had a very difficult couple of weeks, so I may be a little unclear in my comments. I'm very tired, so please bear with me. Why can't you find out before making the commitment whether the Pinelands will agree to have these buildings torn down?
Well, Dave, I think he can answer that. But it's not a commitment, though, in that the contract is contingent on getting it. So if the township doesn't get those approvals, or doesn't get the appraisal, well, if the appraisal doesn't reach the number, and/or the Pineland doesn't approve it, we will have no obligation to go forward with the purchase.
All right.
So it's not, you know what I'm saying? So it's not, we're just agreeing to move forward in good faith to meet those conditions, which hopefully we would, but we're not, if for whatever reason the Pinelands doesn't approve it, then we won't be obligated to purchase the properties.
Understood. Okay. But, so you won't buy these 3 properties until you know that you can do with them what you want?
Well, in terms of getting the Pinelands approval to demolish is really the...
Right.
Right, and getting an appraisal to say that our price is fair.
Okay, so now you've spent 40% of the $1 million that the mayor has been carefully protecting for years, because that money was committed by UEC some years ago, and he has carefully not spent it on anything else. You've now spent 40% of that money on 3 properties. What happens when you go to buy the next property, assuming that you can go through with this whole plan of acquiring all these properties and knocking them down? What happens if you go forward, you go to acquire the next property, and the Pinelands Commission does not approve that property for tearing down? The whole plan comes to an end.
Well, that's a planner question, not a lawyer question.
Okay.
I don't know.
I wasn't...
No, I understand. I don't know that. I'm not sure about the Pinelands approval process.
I'm not sure I realize that's a question for the planner. I'm not sure in the context whether I should be looking at and addressing the council or looking over here and addressing the planner.
I think I'm trying to assist, but that's more in Dave's bailiwick than mine.
The process with the Pinelands is really for them to identify or request information if a property is deemed historically significant. It does not mean that you cannot demolish the property. It only means that they want specific information on that property that they can document for later on. Occasionally, there is something of such significance that they will kind of put something of a buffer around it or something like that. But it is my understanding, based upon doing a preliminary review of information, that none of these properties in this stretch are historically significant.
That's interesting, because at one point, one of Mr. Reagan's associates proposed creating a historic district in the downtown area. So there is at least some reason to believe that you may or may not be correct. It's an opinion. It's not an established ruling by the Pinelands Commission. So I think what you're saying is that you don't know if the township were able to acquire the entire redevelopment area. You don't know whether we would be given permission to tear it all down. You think that we would be, but you don't know for sure.
Based upon what I have identified at this point, looking into the research, there is nothing there that would prevent the township.
Can we get that determination before we start spending money, instead of hoping that you're correct? Granting that you're probably more than 50% correct, I have to remember that there was a very serious proposal that a number of us opposed because of the restrictions it puts on property owners of creating the